No sleep tonight for you, better chug that Mountain Dew. I am a theater kid. I believe I talked about that in my first video, but I need to reinstate it here because I need to talk about my credentials, ethos. I pretty much grew up in the theater. I did school theater all the way through middle and high school, so that's like 7 years of experience. Since I got involved, theater pretty much took over my life. I was involved in pretty much every way. I acted, I directed, I wrote. I was theater president my senior year. I love theater. I was theater and theater was me. I've also seen a couple of Broadway shows myself, some on Broadway, some touring, but all incredible. I love them all. I have all my playbills in my room. The stage really is such a magical place, and when something comes to threaten the magic of it, I do get a little bit defensive myself just because, like I said, I love theater so much. This year, Broadway has been under a lot of speculation and a lot of attack because they keep stunt casting people. And if you're not familiar with the concept of stunt casting, it's basically hiring a very well-known celebrity or actor or singer or just otherwise performer without really going through all the steps of auditions. They just sort of jump right into the cast. And Broadway typically does this to drive sales just because, you know, the allure of a big name being in a show brings in audiences that might otherwise not go see the show. And I mean, it has been pretty successful. You know, a ton of people have started talking about these shows that I'm going to mention, even though they might not have otherwise, just because of the actors that were included in them. So literally just this year, just in 2026 alone, Peyton List was cast to Heathers off Broadway as Heather Chandler. Dylan Mulvaney was cast as Anne Boleyn in Six. Megan Thee Stallion was cast as Zidler in Moulin Rouge, and Joshua Bassett was cast as Seymour in Little Shop of Horrors. And just before I go on, I just want to preface that I'm not here to hate on the actors in any way, and I'm definitely not here to like hate on women because a lot of the people that get mentioned when it comes to stunt casting are women. I literally love all of these people in their own personal endeavors, and I'm here to talk more so about Broadway and stunt casting as systems. So just putting that out there. And so pretty much all of those actors that I mentioned have come under fire as a result of their stunt casting. Now, it's actually really funny that these examples got popular because Six and Heathers are my two favorite musicals that have been, I'll say, in the Broadway sphere, because Heathers was never actually on Broadway. It should be. It's an incredible show, but these cut so close to home, and it hurts me to even talk about these shows like this in any way that's not just glowing praise, because these two shows have meant everything to me for these past couple of years. Peyton was cast in the very vocally difficult role of Heather Chandler. If you've never seen Heathers, just think Regina George from Mean Girls, but without any hint of insecurity, doubt, or fear. Heather Chandler does not gaff. And so because of that, her vocal role is very, very strong. There's a lot of belting, there's a lot of high notes, and there's one specific part of the show that kind of went viral during Peyton's run, is during Candy Store, which is the main song that's sung by the Mean Girls, the Heathers. And near the end of the song, Heather Chandler sings this very demanding riff that's supposed to kind of show how show-offy and abrasive her personality is. That moment really makes or breaks a Heather Chandler in that show because it's sort of one of their only opportunities to really show out vocally, and it's often very hit or miss. Peyton's rendition was a bit of a miss, and it's no fault of her own. I mean, she's a very talented TV movie actor. I think that putting her into this role was kind of setting her up for failure just because she wasn't trained in the same way a lot of other Chandlers have been. And so I'll try and see if I can put a comparison here of her vocals at that part versus a Heather with a stage background so you can see the difference. The difference is very apparent to anybody who casually or frequently goes to the theater. It's really hard to miss. As for Dylan Mulvaney in Six, a lot of people had issues with her playing the role of Anne Boleyn simply because she's trans, which doesn't really make sense to me. She's a woman. it should be fine. Because Six is pretty much a show that's all about empowering women. I remember back when I first started getting into the show, one of the things that really stuck with me was like, no men are allowed on the Six stage, which was really funny. And so a lot of people are using that to weaponize against Dylan, which doesn't hold up because she's a woman, so she's allowed on the Six stage. It's literally as simple as that. The only criticism of her casting that I do agree with is the fact that she is not vocally on the same level as some of the other queens in the show. It just so happened that during her run, the original Catherine of Aragon and Catherine Parr from like the original Broadway cast came back to reprise their roles. So that caused a lot of division among fans who, you know, were really excited to go back and see the original queens, and then seeing Dylan perform with them not up to the same standard. It just kind of made her look a little bit worse, I think, when she was put next to these like legends in the fans' eyes. But I do really love that they cast a trans woman because I think that it sends a really positive message. One of Six's writers, I believe, is non-binary. So I think it makes perfect sense for the show. It's perfectly in line with the message that the show wants to convey. And I was honestly really, really happy to see trans representation because I feel like we don't see it enough in the theater. And I absolutely love the rise in colorblind castings. I also think that we should have castings like this where it doesn't matter if you're cis or if you're trans. If you can play the role, you can play the role. It just sucks that it ended up coming through a stunt casting instead of a traditional audition. Then there's also Megan Thee Stallion in Moulin Rouge, and I have to say I am not too familiar with that show. I typically tend to stay away from jukebox musicals just because they're a bit of whiplash. While I was looking into stunt castings, I also kept coming across the videos of Meg Donnelly singing Firework in Moulin Rouge, and I was like, why is Addison on stage singing a Katy Perry song? If you know, you know. Although my first video is talking about writing a jukebox musical, so I sound like a hypocrite, but it's fine. You know what I mean. As for Megan Thee Stallion, I think that her performance was really, really fun.
Party girls, they don't get hurt, can't feel anything. When will you learn? You must push it down. Push it down.
Like I said, I don't really know that much about the show, so I wasn't too familiar with her character, but the way that she played him seemed really cool. Very fun, very upbeat, very her. You can tell that she infused a lot of her own personality into it, and I think it worked out really well. But one criticism that I kept seeing was the fact that she can't sing, and that a lot of her parts had to be adapted to fit the fact that she can't sing, so it was more so talking or rapping or just sort of trying to find some way around it. And then finally, we have Joshua Bassett in Little Shop of Horrors. And I did see clips of his performance, and from what I could see, you couldn't hear him. I heard some people blaming the sound system, that they just didn't turn his mic up loud enough, but some people said that they saw him perform live and they couldn't hear him in the audience. And I think that this is a lot in part because he is a TV movie actor and he does sing, but he does pop. He's more pop oriented, which is very different and has a lot of different standards, I think, for the singing. You don't have to be able to belt as well or sing as sustainably where you're going to be able to hold notes for extended periods of time at very high volumes, 8 shows a week. Musical theater is a beast, and I think that a lot of people who are stunt cast aren't quite prepared for how demanding it can be. It can be different than even putting on concerts. It's a whole different realm of performance, to be honest. And so in all of these actors and the criticisms that I've brought up, the one common thread is just the fact that they're unqualified for the positions. That's not in any way to dig on the actors or to say that they are not good at what they specialize in or something like that, because they are all incredible, right? that's why they were stunt cast, because they have a lot of fans, because they're good at what they do. The issue is more so just that they are not oriented towards musical theater. Now, I have to say, honestly, I was a little bit surprised about Joshua Bassett not doing like crazy, crazy good in Little Shop, because we know he can sing. I mean, I first was introduced to him in High School Musical, the musical, the series, which I'm sure a lot of people were as well. And he was really good in there. But I mean, I guess you can hear in his tone, it's just not belty enough. I don't know. And a lot of people, I guess, think that because these actors are in the same like vein of profession, that they would be able to transfer their skills over to musical theater and it would be fine. But it's not necessarily the case. If you imagine like a male model or something being put on a pro sports team just because he has muscle, or a comedian being recruited to defend somebody in court because they're a good speaker, it's not the same, right? It's a completely different skill set. You need different qualifications. You need a ton of training to even be at like the entry level. It's just not fair. You're throwing them into somewhere where they just cannot be at the same level as their peers. And literally the only valid reason that I could find to support the concept of stunt casting was the fact that it brings up sales and interest to the shows. And yeah, there might be more people stage dooring and stuff like that, but it really just hurts the community in the long run, because it's almost like a slap in the face to actors who have worked really hard to get where they are, and then just to see somebody who didn't do like half of the training that they did just put straight into the lead role. It honestly feels like the system and like Broadway as a whole doesn't really acknowledge your talent. It doesn't acknowledge everything that you've been through to get there. It's like they're disregarding it and saying that any star could easily come and replace you at any given time. And it also says to the fans that Broadway doesn't really care about our experience, because if you're putting somebody in this position that you know is not qualified and is not ready to take on a role of that magnitude, that the audiences who maybe aren't coming just to see that specific actor are going to be disappointed. They're going to see the show and they're going to say, yeah, that was really good. I just really wish that this person had been able to sing out a little more. Because ultimately, one of the driving factors of musical Broadway shows are the vocals. The vocals are incredible. I have long said that I genuinely think that like Broadway and West End and like musical theater singers around the world are some of the best singers in the world, because the level of technique and precision that you need to execute that level of skill like over and over and over again is incomparable. I walk out of Broadway shows with like chills all the time, because it's so cool. And it's not even just the live music aspect. It's like you hear somebody belt like a beautiful note and it's just like, it feels like honey in your soul. It's so pretty. I think a lot of people felt that for the first time when watching Wicked and hearing Cynthia belt. And I'm literally like, yes, 100%. Like, this is what you get with musical theater. And the fact that they don't need auto-tune. Cynthia sounds like that in real life, in person. It's just incredible. I love musical theater so much. And with Broadway, I mean, Broadway has always been very profit driven, pretty much since it was established. But I feel like this epidemic, not even epidemic because it's been around for a while, but this process of stunt casting, it really, really just exemplifies how much they care about the money. And like, on a similar topic, it also kind of reminds me of the entire bootleg debacle. Bootlegs are pretty much when somebody goes into a Broadway show and records it or records parts of it. And this technically isn't allowed. A lot of times, if you try and record something at a show, somebody will come over and either escort you out of the theater or tell you not very kindly to put away your phone. And this is because they want to keep the show free of leaks. You know, they want it to be where if you want to see the show, you have to come in and see the show. You can't just post it online and have people see it that way. And I would honestly have more of a problem with bootlegging if Broadway made more of an effort to release pro shots, meaning professionally shot recordings of a show. Because in some ways, pro shots are the only way that people will ever get to see a show. Because if you think about somebody who lives maybe out in a very rural area or somebody who's low income who might not have access to a show, even if they do tour near them, they likely will never be able to see the show. They'll be able to listen to the soundtrack, sure, but I think we can all agree that there is something completely different and something magical about actually being able to see the show acted out in front of you. There's the acting, the little moments that happen on stage between the actors. There's the lighting, there's the set design, there's the choreography. There's so much that you don't get through just listening to a recording that you get to see when you see a recording of the show. And if they made these pro shots available, even if they literally put them on YouTube for like $2.99 or something, like that would be incredible. And I think a lot of people would love that. It's ridiculous to have these super high prices to see the shows. And then especially if they're only showing in New York or special locations around the country. So now people have to pay for transportation to go see said shows. They have to pay for lodging. They have to pay for food and all these kinds of things once they get there. It's not a reasonable ask for most people. So sometimes being able to watch a bootleg on YouTube is the only way they will ever get to see the show. And like that's not fair. And it's very elitist. It's basically implying that you only get to see the show if you are wealthy enough to afford it. And I believe that theater is meant for everyone. Theater is the kind of art form that can bring us all together and can unite us all. Especially considering there's a lot of shows that are about very universal experiences. Like, think Mean Girls. Mean Girls is about a bunch of bullying in high school. Like, why is this restricted to the ultra wealthy? Like, I feel like anybody should be able to see that. A lot of times people say that bootlegs are also very disrespectful to the actors because you are lowering the potential number of people who can go and see the show. Because if the bootlegs weren't available, more people would come in and see them live and they would have a larger audience and stuff like that. And that by releasing bootlegs, you are allowing people to not actually come in and support the actors directly. And while yes, I completely understand, like I said, I used to act. I understand the feeling of having a full audience and being like, wow, all these people came here to see me, especially because these people are doing this as their job and ticket sales can, show that the show is successful and can end up profiting them. I completely understand that. I completely understand that. But you also have to think about the fact that for actors, this is also their art. And I can't talk for everybody who's acted before. I'm sure there are a ton of people who would disagree with me, and that's completely fine. But in my experience as an actor, I would rather, for somebody who cannot comfortably afford to see the show, I would rather they see it in the comfort of their own home and enjoy the fruits of my labor than spend their last paycheck on a train to New York to come and see it and support me in person. I would just want them to enjoy the show, especially if the show isn't even running anymore. I don't understand why they're so strict about that. If a show is already off Broadway, it should not be so hard to get any recording of it because it's not like I could come see it now anyway. I don't know. And like I said, a lot of people might disagree with me on my perspective on that, but personally, if you want to see my show, you can see my show. And honestly, if somebody is in a financial situation where they can come and see the show comfortably within their means, even if a bootleg is released, they're gonna still come see it anyway. So ultimately, I don't think bootlegs are doing that much to hurt Broadway's pockets. All the seats are still full, so I don't know what we're talking about. I mean, the one super valid concern that I do have about pro shots is when you're recording and the actors can see your camera and they can see the gleam of it. I remember during a show one time, this one mom was sitting straight in the middle of the auditorium and she had her little phone and she was filming us. And the back of her phone was like pearlescent. And so it was reflecting everything straight back at us. And every time we would go backstage, we'd be like, oh my gosh, did you guys see that mom? Like her phone is like shining straight at us and she has the flash on and everything. It was crazy. And then somebody was like, guys, I'm sorry, that's my mom. And then we were like, oh. So I will say, yes, 100%, that part is very annoying and very distracting. I find it very funny whenever I'm scrolling on TikTok and I see somebody's perspective from the audience and somebody will be singing and then all of a sudden they're like staring straight at the camera and either they're like thinking like, put it down, or they're like, if you're gonna film me, I'm gonna give you a show. Like it's always one of the two. There was that one time where Sam Pauly adapted the lyrics in New Money to tell somebody to put the phone down because they were filming. And for a couple of the actors that I mentioned previously, being Dylan Mulvaney and Megan Thee Stallion, they had to adapt the shows a little bit in order to fit the actors' ranges. So for Dylan, they had to lower the key of Don't Lose Your Head so that she was able to sing it. And then for Megan, they had to work around the fact that she can't sing and basically adapt her pieces to fit her voice a little bit better. And again, I'm in no way criticizing the actors. I'm criticizing the systems that put them in these positions, because I don't think that it's fair to adapt a song or a show to fit a specific actor when there are tons of other perfectly capable and qualified actors out there who can do it just the way it was written, because there's so much care and intention put into writing these shows and composing them. And so to change it just seems a bit strange. Now, I'm fairly certain Dylan Mulvaney had the full backing of Marlowe and Moss, the creators of Six. So, obviously, if they don't have a problem with it, it ultimately isn't that big of a deal. But it just sets a precedent for the rest of Broadway that just doesn't really sit right with me. It's almost saying, like, cast whoever you want, we'll fix it later. Broadway has forever been so prestigious in who they cast, and they've come out with some of the most talented casts ever. And so to see them being adapted in this way just sort of brings down that level of prestige, and it just makes it seem like they just care less and less about the quality, and that's concerning as a consumer. All of this about stunt casting has sort of created a lot of buzz in the theater community about the ethics of stunt casting and its implications for theater. And it has sort of divided the theater community into what I found to be three main sections. There are smaller subsections, but this is kind of what I observed. There are some people that will defend the actors and hate on the show. Let's take Peyton List's Candy Store riff, for example. There has been a surge of people coming out and saying, oh no, like, you can't even blame Peyton for not being able to sing that riff or not being able to sound good, because the riff is just a very bad riff. What? I am so sick of hearing this take. I hear it all the time and it makes no sense to me. As somebody who has loved Heathers for literal years, I have never heard anybody say that the Candy Store riff is bad. I have only heard praise for it. I've heard, like I said, that it can make or break a Heather Chandler, but never that it's an inherently bad or poorly written riff. It's a phenomenal riff. You just have to be able to execute it well. Then the second group is people who take the opportunity to hate on the actor, right? So in the case of Peyton List, they might go after her specifically and be like, she should never be on Broadway. What is she doing? She needs to step up her game. She needs to do better. And then there will be people that are like, guys, chill out. It's her debut. She's improving. She's still working on her confidence and everything. And then people will be like, okay, well, they don't need to be working on their confidence if they're on Broadway, or in her case, off Broadway. She's on a major stage. She already needs to be at that level of professionalism and skill, which I agree with that part. If you're on Broadway, that is not the opportunity for you to get good. That is your opportunity to get better. Of course, there is always room for you to improve within a role, but your starting point should still be very high because you're on a world stage. You should be able to perform at that level. But I don't agree with hating on the actor, because it's not their fault they got recruited. I mean, they got offered a lot of money and a position that a lot of people would love to be in. Of course, they would accept it. And then that brings us to the third class of people, who are like me, who have no qualms with the actors themselves, but more so with the system that is putting them in these positions. I can acknowledge that the show is a very good show. Six is a very good show. Don't fight with me on that one. I can acknowledge that the actor is very skilled in what they typically do, but I can say that they were not the right choice for a specific role. And I don't think I'm wrong in that. And of course, Broadway sees all this infighting, and they're going to keep stunt casting. As long as it keeps the money rolling in, they're going to keep doing it. And then while I was preparing for this video, I had like flashbacks to Cameron Dallas in Mean Girls. Oh, I saw a ton of people saying that they thought they were casting Shawn Mendes, but then it was Cameron Dallas. I recently rewatched like videos of him singing, especially in More is Better when he's singing to Katie in her room. It's so bad. I would prefer the girl you were. I have no idea how he even got cast for that, because I'm pretty sure he's not a singer. I mean, then again, Dylan Mulvaney is also technically a social media personality, but I'm pretty sure she was also on Book of Mormon. So she has some experience. So one show that kept popping up when I was doing my research for this was Waitress, and that they've had so many bad stunt casts that people wouldn't even like reference the actual actors that were stunt cast. They would just say like all of Waitress. I just thought back to when Colleen Ballinger was in it, because the first time that I like ever watched like recordings of that show, she was Dawn. And I didn't even realize it was her until the whole Toxic Gossip Train stuff came out. And then I was like, that was her? That's why it was so bad. Anyway. And of course, there are incidences of stunt casting going well. There are a ton that I found online. One of my favorites was Sabrina Carpenter in Mean Girls on Broadway. She played Katie for like, I think 2 nights. She played Katie while Renee Rapp played Regina, which is a cast that I would love to see. That would be incredible. Unfortunately, she was only on the show for, like I said, 2 nights before COVID came in, shut everything down, and by the time it reopened, she was moving on in her career, so she didn't come back. And Sabrina is very well vocally trained. She is more of a pop singer, but luckily Mean Girls is a very pop-ish role. She also fit the role very well in terms of personality and acting. Sabrina comes from an acting and a singing background, so luckily I think she did pretty well from what I've seen. Unfortunately, most of them are kind of lost media because she was only on for like 2 nights, but it still has the like fundamental pitfalls of stunt casting. There were a ton of other actors who would have loved the chance to audition for that role, but instead they went with a big name celebrity, and that's not fair to them. It's like she cut the line, and even though she did do a good job, it still wasn't fair to the rest of them. And also, just as a disclaimer, I do feel the same way about stunt casting in Hollywood because it is still a thing. Instead of doing traditional auditions, they very often just call up a celebrity and say, hey, we want you in this role. And I absolutely love when they go through real auditions and they choose either new talent or people who just really, really fit the role. Even if they're unknown or still on the come up, I love seeing fresh faces. But on Broadway, I do find that it is a larger deal that warrants more discussion, because on Broadway or just in musical theater in general, it is like 10,000 times more difficult to get well known and recognized from your achievements in the theater than it ever would be doing TV movie acting. Just I think because musical theater, it is mainstream, but not mainstream in the same way that movies are. Like if you stopped a random person on the street and asked them to name 5 Oscar-winning actors, they probably could. If you asked them 5 Tony-winning actors, they probably couldn't if they even knew what a Tony is. Like there are some names that I know that are like massive in the theater world that people outside of theater probably couldn't name for the life of them. Like I remember one year, Barrett Wilbert Weed was my top artist on Spotify because I listened to a ton of Heathers and a ton of Mean Girls. And when I shared that, my friends were all like, who is that? And I was like, oh, please. Although, I mean, I guess she is kind of known for those 2 roles, but even actors like Taylor Louderman or Jeremy Jordan, who are massive in the theater space, people outside of the theater would never know their name. As opposed to if I mention somebody like Zendaya or Leonardo DiCaprio, everybody knows who those are, right? Even if you've never seen a movie with them in it, you know who they are just because they are so mainstream. That's why I have so much respect for Broadway actors, especially like Broadway singers, because man, you have to go through so much. Being on Broadway is so taxing. Like I said, I think that they're some of the most talented people out there, and they get like a fraction, just like a little sliver of the recognition. Like that must suck. But you will not catch me being like Timothée Chalamet, because just because this form of art is less mainstream or maybe less celebrated, less popular than TV movie acting, I will never say that it's a dying art form. I will never say that it's any less of an art form. And so just as a final point, I want to say that even though I do see stunt casting as sort of a harmful thing to the Broadway sphere, I know it has its benefits. I know that there are some things that it has to offer, but ultimately I really do feel like it is just hurting the space more than it's helping. I'll reiterate that I am not saying any of this in any way to demean or belittle the actors that have been stunt cast and say that they're not talented or anything like that. That's absolutely not true. I think that if they were to go through the process and be cast just like everybody else without regard to their name or their status or their popularity, that would be incredible. But until then, I just don't think that it's fair for them to get a free pass, you know? I think Broadway should 100% be a prestigious art from the performance side, but I think that it should also be accessible from the audience side because everybody deserves quality entertainment, like this channel. Oh, look at that. If you think that this is quality content, go ahead and subscribe and drop a like because I'm trying to get monetized. And if I get monetized, then I can upgrade my setup and I can probably get a better background than whatever's going on right now. Thank you so much to everybody who has supported me thus far. Thank you to everybody who has subscribed to me. And thank you for watching this far. It means a lot to me. I really do appreciate it. All right, well, I don't really have an outro, so